Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. I apologize once again if this review is kind of late, like a lot of my other recent videos have been. Work's slowly quieting down, so hopefully in the near future I'll be able to make more timely videos for things like Matrix Resurrections and things like that. So, speaking of Matrix Resurrections, that actually is the movie review I'm going to be doing for you today. So, in this fourth film, you guys, first and foremost, I actually really like the first Matrix movie. Matrix Reloaded, I really enjoy. There's some action sequences in the second film I think are extremely good. Story wise, it is a little bit of a letdown compared to the first one, even though it's still a really good movie. And then Matrix Revolutions was kind of the one where I'm like, oh, I'm kind of checked out of this whole Matrix thing. I understood how it wrapped up the way it did and things like that, but I thought the overall third film um, kind of was once again a huge decline in quality compared to the first two movies. And so going into Matrix Resurrections, I was kind of cautious going into it because I knew how much of a decline it was from Reloaded to Revolutions, and hopefully this one wasn't worse or anything. And then I heard the reviews online of people who really liked the movie and people who really hated the movie. So luckily, I am one of those people who liked the movie. I wouldn't say I loved the movie, but I liked the movie. But overall, for my synopsis for you guys, if you don't know anything about this movie at all, and without me giving away spoilers and things like that, as usual, this will be a spoiler-free review. Um, Basically, what this movie's about is Neo is basically back in the real world. They explain throughout the movie how he got back there and things like that. And basically, once again, he's having visions about the Matrix. He's taking blue pills, going to therapy. He's trying to understand through this therapist that he's seeing what exactly are these visions? How come he keeps having them? How comes there's times where um, he'll be completely somewhere else and then he'll show up in a room that actually isn't reality, and then he kind of has to get caught up to speed of where he is and things like that. And so over the course of this movie, he meets the guy that basically is the new Morpheus, pretty much. Allows Neo to kind of learn how far the rabbit hole goes, like how in the first movie that happened, they showed him how far the rabbit hole was able to go. And so basically, he said, I understand kind of why you're having these visions and why things aren't making sense and how reality kind of is almost like a lie to you and how you're trying to understand how things are really going and where we really are. So basically, he follows both this new Morpheus character and the character named Bugs, who's new to this movie. It hasn't been used in earlier films. And basically, they help him get back into the Matrix. He finds out about these new problems that have happened. He finds out kind of where Trinity has been and kind of how she managed to survive the events of the earlier three movies, since we thought in Revolutions that she passed away. So basically, there's a lot of opportunities and revelations and discoveries that Neo has while going back into the Matrix, kind of rediscovering everything that's happening. And he has to figure out what these new problems are and what he can do to resolve those problems. So overall, guys, like I said, I liked this movie. I didn't love this movie. There's things about Resurrections that I think work. There's things about Resurrections I think that don't quite work as well. I'm one of those people too where regarding the Wachowskis and kind of where they've been over the years and kind of what other films they've made over the years. Outside of Matrix Reloaded, I really haven't been super impressed with the films they've turned in, like Speed Racer and Jupiter Ascending and Cloud Atlas and things like that. I have really not been super impressed with a lot of their films over the years. So Matrix is kind of their forte at this point, or at least it's safe to assume so, since this is kind of their first good film in a long time. But overall, from my positives and negatives of this movie, as far as going back into Morpheus's original question in the first Matrix movie, what is the Matrix? I think that question and the response that the film has this time around are really interesting. I think the first act of this movie explores that the best. There's a lot of scenes where the therapist is talking to Neo and he's holding his hand and he's like, this is real right now. What's going on? This is real. This is what's really happening. Um, if you're having visions of you having being somewhere else, that part is fake. This is real. The whole making a connection and you feeling something. There's other scenes that suggest that what Neo is in is reality, but it's definitely a former version of it. And like kind of like in the earlier Matrix movies, we find out that the machines kind of took over everything, and the way we see life is not where life currently is, hundreds of years into the future. So basically, I liked how this film had its response to what is the Matrix, because I think this film has a much deeper meaning and understanding of what that is. So I liked how this film approached that, because I thought it was very interesting this time around, and it probably hasn't been since the first Matrix movie where this question has been addressed so differently and so uniquely. Neo and Trinity's shared screen chemistry really was a huge success part of the movie. I think their screen chemistry really was so strong in those first three movies that once again it really proves once again that that is the case, and why some of these Matrix movies are successful the way they are is because the shared screen chemistry between Neo and Trinity is so successful, and you want them to be together, and you really care about their relationship and things like that. So I thought the whole Neo and Trinity stuff really worked very well in this movie. I also like this film's idea of when someone's really imaginative, whether they're imaginative for a career or they have to be imaginative to kind of pursue the life that they have. Sometimes they can get so good at what they do that sometimes it can cloud the way they actually see reality. So I thought that's another interesting thing of going back to the what is the Matrix question, is there's times where, because we find out, Neo is this game designer in modern day, or at least our modern day, and over the years since the previous Matrix film came out, Revolutions, he's been making these games that strongly resemble the Matrix. And so basically, the film's making the point that because he's so into these games and has been making these games for so many years since the events of the third movie, his sense of imagination is kind of always in that game. And so when he's trying to focus on reality and try to decide what's real and what isn't, sometimes his imagination kind of can cloud that. And so I like the film's idea of imaginative people kind of having a clouded sense of reality, that they can still see the stuff that everybody else can see, but because they have to think so creatively so often, it can cloud the way that they see things sometimes. I also liked the film's approach on the long-term effects of the returning characters. Um, some of them have smaller roles this time around. I guess I won't even say who it is just to kind of prevent spoilers, but there's some smaller Matrix characters from previous films that show up, and I like how the film depicts kind of the long-term effects of what's been going on with them over the years, and kind of how some of them have aged and haven't aged very well, and how some of them kind of don't trust people anymore and things like that. Some of them don't like the way that Zion was, um, how Zion has progressed, and how the machines kind of learn to be around people, and people have learned to be around machines, and there's a cooperative effort, but there's still a lot of machines out there that don't have good intentions and things like that. So I like the idea of seeing the long-term effects of people who have been in this Matrix world for as long as we remember back in the first movie, and kind of seeing the effects that they have on how the Matrix has changed over the years and things like that. There's also some great nostalgic moments here. I would say the first act in particular, they definitely bring back a lot of Matrix One elements, a lot of finding out how we found out who Trinity was in that first movie is very similar to kind of how we found out about Bugs and some other characters that show up in this movie. So I liked all the nostalgic moments that kind of bring you back to that first Matrix movie as well. Even the opening credits are kind of in the spirit of something you would have saw in like Matrix Reloaded or something like that. For my negatives of this movie, though, I thought the second act in particular was very sloppy. I would even say some of the action scenes in the second act are kind of boring to watch, to be honest. And that's a very not so good thing when you're making action scenes and the viewer thinks it's kind of boring to get through. There's just a lot of moments in the second act where there's a new idea in this new Matrix world called swarming, where the villains can basically make all the people that are in the Matrix come attack you, and that they strictly work for the villain. And so basically, they won't stop until the villain tells them to stop and things like that. But a lot of things in the second act I thought were just really sloppy, kind of all over the place. A lot of information was thrown at us at once. And like I said, some of the action was a little boring in the second act. So I thought the second act of this film was the most disappointing portion of this movie. There's also some conflicting information every once in a while for some of the characters and for the overall world of the Matrix. Some areas of the movie suggest that it's been like almost 60 years since the last since Revelations or Revolutions, and some other characters suggest that it's only been 20 years, similar to the Matrix franchise has been going since the events of the last movie, and just some other conflicting information as far as um, how characters returned for this movie and kind of how they oversimplified how they came back and things like that. So there's just some conflicting information every once in a while. I think some of it just has to do with the writers of this movie having a hard time kind of figuring out how to get us back into the Matrix and how to have certain characters return and things like that. So I thought some of the information we were thrown at was a little conflicting at sometimes, and as a result, makes the film a little difficult to watch at certain points. And like I said, some moments do feel a little unimaginative. There's just a lot of scenes where Keanu Reeves was able to do his own kung fu stunts in the earlier movies, and this time around he's just kind of using his hands and just using force fields and pushing things around. While in the earlier Matrix movies, they actually got someone to train him to do the kung fu scenes himself and things like that. So as a result, there's just more things to be impressed by that first Matrix movie, whether it is Keanu Reeves learning martial arts, whether it is the stunt work or the camera work or making it look like you're seeing all angles of a shot of something. Um, so some of the moments in this movie do feel a little unimaginative, and because it is a Matrix movie, I don't really view that as a good thing, unfortunately. And just overall, this film doesn't feel as revolutionary as that first Matrix movie. I think they're so far in, and so many films have tried to copy and imitate the Matrix at this point that it's just I know how hard it is to kind of revolutionize the genre again, but at the same time, I think something could have happened with this movie that really could have wowed us a lot, because that first Matrix movie really kind of blown us away with the stunts and the camera work and how they were able to get certain editing tricks to work and things like that. The second movie kind of continued that greatness. Obviously, the third film was a huge downfall for the franchise, but I don't know. There's something that needs to happen. If you're going to do the Matrix again, you have to do something special with it. And there's just a lot of opportunities here where I feel like the Wachowskis didn't use that to their full advantage. But overall, I'm going to give Matrix Resurrections an 8.5 out of 10. I think there's some great things about this movie. I think there's some really good things. I think a lot of the questions and responses to what is the Matrix was really interesting this time around. But like I said, some of the things in the second act really weren't very interesting. Some of it had some boring action. Some of the information was kind of conflicting with things that happened earlier and later on in the movie. Certain moments just don't feel as imaginative as they should be. And it just doesn't quite feel as revolutionary as that first film did, the film that really kind of got us into the Matrix to begin with. So if they do go down the path of making a Matrix 5, hopefully that's the route that they do, is giving us something revolutionary that we haven't seen with the franchise before. But overall, I'm going to give Matrix Resurrection an 8.5 out of 10. Really like the movie. There's a lot of things I thought were really good, certain things about the movie that really could have been improved upon. But overall, I think it's a decent sequel. I think it's better than Revolutions, even though not quite good as the first film or Matrix Reloaded. I think those are kind of those are like the two Matrix films I go back to the most, it seems like. But 8.5 out of 10 for me. I recommend seeing it, especially if you're a Matrix fan. I really enjoyed the movie, and I hope you guys too.